Hello friends, here I am with new story. I hope you all like the video and subscribe to my channel. So let's start the video with summary. After being brought to the world of the Olympians, Naruto discovers he is the son of a goddess and therefore a half-blood. But Sasuke's master bolt goes missing and Naruto joins Percy Jackson into returning the bolt to the king of the gods before time runs out. Chapter 1. As the village of Konoha celebrated the anniversary of the defeat of the nine-tailed fox just like it had for the last 14 years, a lone figure could be found leaping from the rooftops, invisible from all the civilians and the shinobi. The form was that of a woman, but her identity was being shielded by a white cloak that was hooded and kept her face from sight. This woman was an immortal, or to be more precise, an Olympian goddess. The elemental nations were known by the Olympians and the other minor gods and were visited from time to time. When she arrived in the elemental nation for the first time, she marveled at its beauty and how untouched the forests and the wilds were. However, she was not expecting to fall in love during her time there, but yet that was what exactly happened. His name was Minato Namikaze. The moment she saw him, she felt drawn to him. It was not because he was the Hokage of the village or that he was the strongest in the village, but because he was just so different to most men that she met. Most men she met were pigs in her eyes, only caring about their pride, their power, their wealth, themselves in general. But yet there was this man who was the complete opposite. He was warm, kind, respected everyone round him and even his enemies. He was loved by everyone in the village, and yet he was never arrogant, never cocky, and was never full of himself. He just took it in his stride and got on with his life. But what also intrigued her was that he was a demigod. Unlike most that went to camp half-blood, he never did, but yet he knew what he was. He said even though he never met her, his mother was a goddess and that she talked to him sometimes in his dreams. When she found out who Minato's Olympian parent was, she could not believe it. To say she was shocked was an understatement. It was the last person she had ever expected to have a demigod child other than herself. But yet she fell in love with him and spent 2 wonderful years in this world with him. Then the miracle happened. She was pregnant with her son. At first she had these confused feelings, not completely sure if this was the right thing to do. But when the months went by and when for the first time she saw her child on the monitor of the hospital screen, all she felt was love for her son and wanted to do the whole 9-month pregnancy just like normal mortals would. She didn't have to due to being a goddess, and there were different methods to conceive and give birth to a child, but she wanted to do this the old-fashioned way. This way she bonded more with her child the 9 months she carried him. Then the big day came, and after hours of excruciating labor, which she promptly shouted at Minato, telling him, "You did this to me, you bastard." But then finally her son was born, and right then and there she had never been happier than holding her son in her arms. When her son opened his eyes, they were sapphire blue just like his father, but she could see a twinkle of silver just like hers. Her heart melted and her son quickly took an unmovable place in her immortal heart. But the happiness was quick to end. On the very same night, the village was attacked by the 9-tailed demon fox, and the worst had happened. The man she loved gave his life to protect the village he cared about and was left with no choice but to seal the beast into their son. She was weak from just giving birth and was stuck to staying in bed. That night she silently cried as she rocked her son to sleep, failing at keeping her tears at bay. The afterlife was different in this world, and his spirit would not go to the underworld like those in her world did. Instead, his spirit would go to their world's afterlife, a place she could never visit. Plus now her son carried the power of a great beast that strength could at best match the mighty Typhon, the bane of the Olympians. It had been 14 years since that night, and 14 years since she had been to the elemental nations. It had been 14 years since the man she loved had died, and 14 years since she had to make the most heartbreaking decision in her entire immortal life. The day she had to leave her son behind. She was an Olympian goddess, and the ancient rules stated that all demigod children had to be raised by their mortal parents. But her love died and her son was left without the mortal parent. She wanted to take him with her, but her father, the king of the Olympians, Zeus, the only one other than her who knew of her son's existence, forced her to return to her world. Before she left, she was given one last hour with her son, something she was grateful for. She spent that hour with her little boy and safely hugged him into her chest as she gently rocked him to sleep and sang him a lullaby. Once the hour was up, she gave him to the 4 people she felt she could trust with her son. The 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, Kakashi had taken the student of her deceased love, Jiraiya the Toad Sage the mentor of her love, and Tanabe Senju, someone she slowly came to see as a friend. They promised her that Naruto would be safe and looked after. After kissing her son and muttering how much she loved him, she handed him over and disappeared, not to be seen again in the elemental nations for a long time. But now here she was in village of Konoha to check up on her son after 14 years, hoping that he turned out just like his father and be one of the few or only male she would come to care about. She jumped and ran with such grace and elegance as she leaped across the rooftops and was not making so much as a sound as her foot would land before immediately taking off again. She glanced over into the distance to see a giant parade of sword taking place with the majority of the village looking to attend. But as she made another jump across the rooftops, a small explosion sounded through the area that caught her off guard. Her heightened senses alerted her immediately and quickly whipped out a pair of small hunting knives, slightly larger than those of a standard kunai, and the blade was much sharper and had vine-like designs along the small hilts. After shaking herself back to normal and finding the location of the explosion, she headed over to investigate and to see if anyone was hurt. When she arrived, she found herself looking upon a very odd sight. There was a large group of people massed together with what looked like a boy with black hair that spiked up at the back, which she had to admit looked like a duck's ass. He was wearing a blue top with a high collar with a crest she recognized as a Uchiha clan crest. Standing next to him was a girl around the same age but with bright pink hair and wore a red battle dress with black shorts underneath. Behind her was an older woman who looked a lot like the girl. The goddess could only assume that was her mother or was someone of family relation. Next to them were two Chunin shinobi, and then behind them was a mass group of civilians, all of whom were wielding things such as shovels, pickaxes, brooms, etc. What's going on? She thought as she studied the scene that stood in front of her. In front of this mass of people where the explosion seemed to originate from, she observed and could just about make out a human figure within the smoke, but it was hard to make out due to the smoke obscuring the figure. It took a minute for the smoke to clear when she began to make out certain details of the figure. The figure looked like a young boy around the age of 13 to 14, the same age as the two in front of the crowd. She began to make out his clothes, or what was left of his clothes, which were orange in color. Then she saw his skin color and noticed it was slightly tanned. But what she saw next left her completely horrified and made her feel as if someone had just injected ice all through her body, because she felt cold all the way to the bone. The young boy had blonde spiky hair, and from the one eye that was open she could see they were sapphire blue in color and could just make out small twinkles of silver in them. On his face were 3 whiskers like birthmarks on each cheek. When the smoke completely disappeared and the young boy could be seen clearly, she put a hand to her mouth as she saw his body was covered in cuts, bruises and stab wounds. The wrapped in metal ninja wire coated all over in his own blood was her Naruto, her son. She took her hands away from her mouth and dropped them to her side. She began to clench her fist, which caused her knuckles to go as white as a sheet of paper, and golden ichor began to seep out from how hard her fists were being clenched. Her eyes were glowing silver as small wisps of silver danced around them and began glaring daggers towards the group of people, and was also gritting her teeth with such force that if she was not immortal, they would have smashed and cracked. Anger and rage began to flood her system as an angry tear made its way down her face. Above in the sky, and not realizing how out of control her emotions were becoming, the moon in the sky began to turn shades of red, which was beginning to catch the attention of a lot of people. The clouds in the sky began to part and the wind was beginning to pick up, which began to frighten every villager and shinobi in the village. What the hell is going on? The moon is red, it must be the kawaii. It must be doing this. So that's why she thought. These people thought that her baby boy was the kawaii. She could not believe how blind these people were. However, she stopped her thoughts when she noticed the duck-haired boy pulling out another kunai and was aiming at Naruto's chest. Seeing enough and not allowing her son to be hurt any longer, she leapt from the rooftops and landed between her son and the boy that was about to get his face rearranged. Her silver eyes bored into the eyes of the boy, causing him to take a step back from the intensity they had. After a few moments of silence and the crowd beginning to shout who the hell she was, in a hushed voice that commanded power, she said, "Get away from my son." Then all Hades broke loose. With Naruto moments earlier, "Have a good night, Naruto," Tsuki shouted as Naruto jumped off his stool at the Ikaraku's Ramon bar and began to walk down the streets of Konoha at a quickened pace. The day was October 10th, the day the 4th Hokage defeated the Great Nine-Tailed Fox, and currently the big festival to commemorate the day was in full swing. There were big parades going down the streets with many holding sparklers, food, and drinks and just having a great time in general. The big reenactment of the Kawabi's defeat was just beginning, which no doubt would bring all the shinobi and civilians towards it since it was always a big favorite for the village. Coincidentally, today was also the birthday of one Naruto Uzumaki. He was 14 years old today, and thus far it had proven to be somewhat joyful. He stayed away from the villagers as much as he could, and luckily they did not bother him. Despite being a ninja now, he still could not harm the civilians of the village. Even thought quite a lot were beginning to show signs of letting go of their hatred for him and become somewhat civil towards him. There were still those who treated him like the plague and would not be changing their minds about him anytime soon. He got some presents from his sensei Kakashi, which was new kunais and shurikens made of chakra metal. From the pervy sage he received the Icha Icha book series. This of course gave him a beating from Tswand, telling him to stop corrupting him. He even received a few presents from his friends such as Shikamaru, Kiba, Lee, Neji and even Hinata. However, he did not receive anything from his teammates Sakura or Sasuke, which as of recently he was not very surprised about. Ever since he had managed to bring Sasuke back from his attempt to join Orochimaru and brought him back beaten to a pulp, Naruto's relationship with the two began to dissolve pretty quickly. Sasuke was put under house arrest where his license as a ninja was suspended for 3 years, and Tsunade had Jiraiya put chakra seals on his body to stop him from using chakra and his Sharingan. The civilian council of course did not like this, but Tsunade just told them to go to hell. This prompted the boy to completely blame Naruto, saying Naruto was taking away his goal of getting revenge on his brother and that he was hindering his true power. He swore that he would make Naruto pay greatly. With Sakura, she just followed Sasuke like a little puppy. Just when people thought she was beginning to get out of the fangirl phase, she began to sink even lower. Even Ino, who had got out of the fangirl phase, would look at her with slight disgust. The way she was acting not only prompted Tsunade to now only teach Ino how to use medical ninjutsu, but it caused Naruto's crush on the girl to pretty much dissolve. "It's nice out tonight," Naruto said to himself as he got closer to his rundown apartment in the more shady area of the village. There was no one around, so the area was pretty much barren. Everyone was at the festival, congregated into one part of the village, which left everywhere else silent and unpopulated. As he walked down the empty streets, Naruto looked up at the sky to see it was another clear night and the stars and the moon was shining brightly down from the night sky. He didn't know why, but ever since he was little, whenever he looked up at the moon and the stars, he felt this odd wave of relief and warmth spread through him. He told no one this, but he loved the night sky and he just felt like all his troubles were washed away and felt at peace. When he was on missions with his team, while the others slept, he would silently look at the sky. Plus, whenever he looked up at the sky, he felt as if someone was watching him. It would have freaked Naruto out, but the feeling didn't feel bad. It just felt right for some odd reason, oddly comforting. Naruto shook his head from his thoughts and continued to walk down the deserted path. He saw his apartment building and looked in the direction of his apartment. He could just about see it and felt a little relieved when he saw it was intact. In the past, his home had been firebombed and broke into numerous times, especially on his birthday due to the fuzzball inside his gut. He did want to move to somewhere slightly nicer before, but no one would take him in. The only reason he could live here was because the owner for the building was quite a shady character, and as long as he got the rent money, then he did not care who lived there. Snap! Naruto was taken out of his musings and thoughts when he felt his right foot hit some kind of wire before he suddenly found himself wrapped in ninja wire, his arms and legs firmly pressed against his body. What the hell? Damn it, Naruto said aloud, not believing he let his ninja stand still like this. He had let his guard down as he stared into the night sky, and it had just cost him. "We got him, folks," a voice called, making Naruto swing his head to see 2 Chunin shinobis coming out of the dark alleyways between the buildings with a rather large group of civilians following behind them. "Did you really think the little yearly fox hunt was not going to happen just because you're a shinobi?" the Chunin said, coming up and giving Naruto a light slap across the face and a smirk making his way on his face. Naruto growled towards the large group, but that only earned him a punch to the gut courtesy of the same shinobi. Temper, the Chunin said, waving a finger in front of Naruto, patronizingly, infuriating Naruto even more. "What's the matter, dope? Got nothing to say?" An all too familiar voice called. "Fox got your tongue?" Naruto looked at the group of civilians as they began to part down the middle to reveal a smirking Sasuke Uchiha walking towards him with his eternal servant Sakura following closely behind him. Behind her was an older woman who had pink hair just like Sakura. That must be Sakura's mom, he thought before he got another punch to the stomach, but this time from Sasuke. You know, I always wondered how you beat me. It never made sense that you had this unimaginable power deep inside you that just seemed to come out of nowhere. But now I know how you beat me. You have the nine-tailed fox sealed inside you. It was not your power that beat me, it was the fox. I knew all along you could not beat me without help. It just shows how weak and pathetic you are. Oh, and this coming from the guy who used Orochimaru curse seal. Yeah, I see you did it all by yourself, Naruto said, snorting with sarcasm, but was on the receiving end of a hard slap from Sakura. Shut up, demon, Sakura screeched out, causing Naruto and some of the other to wince at her high-pitched voice. You don't talk in Sasuke's presence. You're nothing but dirt underneath his feet, she said, with many nodding in agreement. You do realize that what you're doing is treason. I'm a shinobi of this village. You think we care dead last? Sasuke said, snorting. Once I'm through with you, I'm leaving this pathetic village and heading straight for Orochimaru. I already have my guides with me, he said, getting a look of confusion from Naruto. The two Chunin with the mob smirked and pulled their shirts down slightly from their necks to reveal two similar curse marks to the one Sasuke has on him, glowing slightly from the power that was within each of them. You work for Orochimaru, Naruto said, glaring at the two, but felt a pain in his shoulder and saw a kunai had been thrown by one of the Chunins and was now lodged in him. Naruto gritted his teeth, trying to let the pain get to him. We must admit your village's security has become very poor, but then again, by the looks of things, we are doing the village a public service by getting rid of you once and for all, the second Chunin said as the crowd behind them began cheering and swinging their weapons around in the air. Bastards, Naruto muttered as he struggled against the ninja wire but found that he could not move a muscle. When will you see that you will never be accepted in Konoha? You are better off dead. It no wonders your parents abandoned you. They must not have wanted a failure of a son. Not that I can blame them, Sasuke said, sneering, causing Sakura and the others to chuckle. Shut your damn mouth. My parents did not abandon me, Naruto shouted, trying to keep his anger at bay. Oh, then where are they? Sakura said, feigning surprise and looking all around her. Naruto gritted his teeth again, trying to think of a good comeback, but was struggling to think properly with the ninja wire pushing against his skin and the kunai still embedded in his shoulder. Come on, everyone. Let's finish what the fourth started, Sakura's mom shouted as everyone began to cheer, and Sasuke and Sakura's smirks got wider. The crowd then got closer to Naruto and Naruto shut his eye for the inevitable. For the next 5 minutes Naruto could only hang there and take the abuse and punishment as he was kicked, punched, stabbed, slashed, slapped and more. He could feel every single hit, and the stabbing would send a fire-like pain going through his body. When the crowd took a step back, Naruto was a bloody mess with many gashes all over his body and purple and black bruises already beginning to form where he had been hit. Now for the finale, the Chunin said as Sasuke walked up and placed an exploding tag on Naruto. He then stepped back and nodded at the Chunin next to him. Said Chunin smirked before he made a hand sign with his hands. As soon as he did, the tag exploded, causing a small explosion to go off and Naruto to be engulfed in smoke. Everyone began smiling as they thought they finally killed the demon, but frowned when after a few minutes the smoke began to die down and saw that Naruto was somehow still alive. The fire from the tag should have killed him, but somehow he was still alive. But by the looks of it, it was barely. It was when Naruto's form was completely out of the smoke that everything around them began to crazy. The moon in the sky began to glow brightly with a reddish tint in it, startling everyone who looked at it. The wind began to pick up and the clouds in the sky began to part away from the village. It must be the Kawaii. It must be doing this, one of the members of the crowd shouted as Sasuke reached into one of his pockets and pulled out a kunai. With this I will be one step closer to my goal, he thought before he charged at Naruto. The kunai in his hand was held tight and aimed directly at the beaten blonde's heart. But that's when it happened. Out of nowhere a hooded figure appeared in front of Sasuke and caught the kunai with ease. The hooded figure was a woman from what they could tell, and small strands of hazel brown hair fell out of the cloak. However, what startled everyone was the intense glowing silver eyes that sent shivers down their spine. Naruto, who was barely conscious, managed to lift his head high enough to see the figure and stayed awake long enough to hear the hooded woman say, "Get away from my son." present. Hearing the 5 words come out of her mouth, everyone in the crowd began to shout and curse the woman in front of them. Sasuke tried to get out of her grip, but it was too strong. Her glare intensified on him before she knocked the kunai out of his hands and backhanded him into a wall. Sasuke Sakura shouted as she ran over to the boy, but was instead on the receiving end of a hard kick to the stomach that sent her crashing through a window. Pathetic, the goddess muttered, thinking it what a disappointment Sakura was to women everywhere for being so blindly obsessed with a disgusting boy who cared about nothing but himself. Who the hell do you think you are? Don't you know who I am? Sasuke shouted, but then regretted it when he found 2 small blades now lodged in his shoulders and pinned him against the wall. He then felt a strong punch to the gut, causing him to vomit the contents in his stomach before the world went black and then blacked out. Now for you 2, she said as she glared at the 2 chunin who stood their ground, and the 2 curse marks on their necks began to glow orange and black markings began to spread. You won't survive fighting us, lady. How about you give up and just give yourself to us? We promise to be nice and gentle, they said, licking their lips and causing the goddess to look at the 2 in disgust. Here's my answer, she said, and as quick as lightning a bow found its way into her hands and she fired 2 arrows directly at the 2 chunins. The arrows were so quick that neither one of the chunins saw it coming before the arrows hit them dead center of their chests and piercing their heart. The 2 were dead in seconds and dropped to the ground like flies, and the arrows in their chest disappeared into silvery wisps. She looked at the dead chunin before setting her sights on the crowd in front of her, who were too stunned to speak and many were trying not to wet themselves. Get lost, she muttered with so much ice in her voice that Konoha's resident ice queen Kurenayuhi would have wet herself. Not needing to be told twice, the group scrambled together before they ran off and disappeared, not ever caring about taking Sasuke or Sakura with them, who were still out cold. As soon as they disappeared, she quickly made her bow disappeared before getting out a hunting knife and ran towards her son and began cutting the ninja wire. It only took a couple of seconds, since celestial bronze was one of the strongest metals around and could cut through almost anything. When the ninja wire came off Naruto's beaten body, he began to fall to the earth before the goddess caught him and lowered his body down softly to the ground and placed his head in her lap. She licked him, overseeing all the damage on his body along with old scars that made ice once again flow through her body and tears cascade down her cheeks. My baby, I'm so sorry. This should have never had to happen to you. I should have taken you with me like I wanted. Damn you, father, and damn the ancient rules, she said. She then pulled out a small bag that carried big pieces of ambrosia. She cut them into small squares and gently put them in Naruto's mouth, helping him to swallow it since he was unconscious and hurt. She then pulled out a small vial of nectar and allowed a few drops to drip into Naruto's mouth. Once she felt he had enough, she capped the vial and put it away. She looked over his body and already began to see Naruto's body beginning to mend itself. However, when she looked closely, she could also make out a small reddish glow coming from the wounds. So the Kawabe heals his wounds quicker. At least there is one positive to having the beast sealed inside of him. As the nectar and ambrosia was doing its job, she felt the presence of a large group heading towards her. She recognizes a few of the signatures and scowled slightly. After a minute, squads of Anbu landed behind her some distance away, with Swan, Jiraiya and Kakashi standing there. All 3 looked at the scene in front of them and saw the unconscious Sasuke pinned to the wall in the out-cold form of Sakura. Then at the 2 dead chunin. Whoever you are, step away from Naruto and remain where we can see you, Tsunade bellowed, but the goddess did not move from her spot and continued to stroke Naruto's hair. Anbu restrained her, Tsunade shouted, and the team of Anbu went close in around her, but before they could get closer, silver chains shot out from the ground and wrapped around the Anbu and forcing them all to the ground. You promised me, she whispered, but the 3 Konoha shinobi heard what she said. Who are you? Why you are caring for Naruto, and what the hell did we promise you? Tsunade said as Kakashi and Jiraiya was examining the woman in front of them. They found her presence very familiar, but they could not pinpoint it. You promised me you would look after him. You promised you would care for him, and yet I find him beaten near death, and by the looks of it, this is not the first time it happened. Who art? Tsunade never finished the sentence since the goddess's head turned around to face them, and all 3 saw her silver eyes glowing with wisps around them dancing like firelight. All 3 shinobi went as pale as a sheet of paper and had a cold chill run up their spine. MIL Lady Kakashi managed to stutter out before he, Jiraiya and Swan got on their knees and bowed. What an honor it is to see you again. How may we be silent, she shouted with an aura of command, leaving the 3 wincing. Why did you not keep your promise? I thought that I could trust you. The three shinobi were shivering slightly. The power she was letting out was insane. It was Jiraiya who managed to gain the confidence to speak up first. "My lady, we can explain. I could not care for him when I had my spy network to look after and keep updated. It was for the good of the village. Sensei was taking good care of him from what I understood. My lady, I lost so many people close to me here, and Minato was one of them. I could not bear being around here anymore. I would not have been a good carer for him anyway with my drinking and gambling," Tsunade said, trying to convince the mighty immortal in front of her. "Minato-sensei was the closest thing I had to a father, and Naruto looked so much like him I could not be around him." It brought back to many painful memories, Kakashi said, trying to tell her his story, but he knew from the look of her face it was not going to work. The three gave their excuses, but the goddess was not having any of it. "Excuses? Those are nothing but excuses. Start telling me what his life was like. I want to know if he was seen as a hero like Minato wanted him to be seen as," she said, but she saw the three gulp and look each other. She knew that was not a good sign. So for the next 10 minutes the three explained what Naruto's lives had been like despite neither wanting to. As she heard how her son was treated and seen throughout the village, her temper was beginning to flare again, so much that it was affecting the weather in the moon again. Though she was happy that her son had managed to somehow stay sane and positive. He managed to find those that cared about him, and his personality was a lot like his father, which she was grateful for. He was fierce when protecting his friends. Not only that, he always seemed to treat girls with respect, something she felt great pride over that her son inherited that trait from her. Well, almost all girls except for Tsunade, that is, which made her inwardly chuckle. Once the three finished explaining, it was just silent. The goddess turned back around and kneeled before her son again, stroking the whisker-like marks on his cheek, which made him giggle slightly in his sleep. The nectar and ambrosia was still healing him, but it looked like most of it was nearly complete. "So of the four that I trusted, it was only Hiruzen that actually did as I asked. My lady, once again we couldn't ask." Jiraiya stopped mid-sentence when she suddenly appeared in front of him and had started choking him with one hand. "Be silent, you pig-headed man. I should have this village leveled to the ground for the things they have done to him," she roared, putting the fear into the three before she calmed herself. But Minato would not want that since he cared for this village. "However, I see now that Naruto being in this world was a mistake. Therefore I will be taking my son back to his real home on Earth. In the world of the Olympians." Swand, Kakashi and Jiraiya shot up from their positions on the ground to protest, but one look from the goddess shut them all up immediately. "But he is needed here. I have taken him on as my student and have just begun training him," Jiraiya said, but she was not having any of it. "I care very little what you want, man. I have made the mistake of leaving him here once before. I will not make that mistake a second time," she said before put her hand on Naruto's chest and a bright light engulfed them. "Please wait," Tsunade shouted, but it fell on deaf ears as the goddess and Naruto shot into the air in a bright silver light before they completely disappeared into the darkness. The three shinobi fell to their knees, knowing that they did not keep their promise to her and would now pay the price. All three only had one thing on their mind. "We screwed up big time." Next day in New York City, Naruto groaned while his eyes began to flutter open and he found himself staring at a ceiling that he did not recognize. Normally it would be white ceiling that belonged to a hospital, but yet it wasn't. He knew he was not in his apartment because the bed he was in was way too comfy to be the one in his apartment. Groggily and shakily he sat up and looked around. He looked around and did not recognize the place he was in. It was a nice room with a set of drawers and cupboards sat against the wall that was made of oak. There was a TV on a nightstand in front of him and a balcony terrace next to the window. As he sat there he began to piece back together what had happened the night before. He was tied up in ninja wire and Sasuke, Sakura, some of Orochimaru-gun's and some villagers decided to beat him since they saw him as a freak of nature. Then he remembered Sasuke about to deliver a final blow before a hooded figure appeared in front of him. Naruto's eyes widened when he remembered the words the figure said before he passed out. "Get away from my son, Mom," he whispered as he whipped his head all around the room, but there was no sign of her, which caused his head to droop. However, he caught the sight of letter that was on top of the set of drawers and Naruto groggily stood up and walked over. He unraveled the letter and began to read what it said. "Dear Naruto, I'm sorry that I could not stay with you until you woke up, but I'm afraid you cannot see me until the time is right. First let me tell you that I am your mother. I'm sorry that I could not be with you while you grew up, but our family has certain rules in place that forbid us from raising our children. You will soon come to understand why. Since you do not know who your father is, allow me to tell you. Your father's name was Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village and the love of my life. He loved you with all his heart despite only ever being able to hold you in his arms the one time. When he died it broke my heart, but nothing has ever been more difficult than having to leave you behind. I had asked people that I thought I could trust to watch over you and raise you in my place, but only one of them actually did what I asked. After discovering what your life was like, I took you out of that world and brought you to mine. I know it may be difficult to adjust, but you will come to love your new home, and I know you will make friends very soon. I have enrolled you in the boarding school called Yancy Academy since you are still required to go to school in this world. In the drawers you will find clothes I have picked up for you, the world's currency, some history books so you can learn about this world, and a map of the city you are currently in. Also I have left a few jutsus that I have kept with me since from what I have been told you are currently practicing your wind element. But I must ask you, don't use your shinobi powers out in the open. This world is a lot different to the elemental nations, and therefore everyone is just a normal civilian that don't know about other worlds and special powers. My son, I know this is a lot to take in and I know you have questions, but all I ask is that you be patient and all will be revealed in time. I love you with all my heart, my baby boy, and I will be watching over you always. Love your mother. PS. Read up on Greek mythology. I guarantee it will come in handy in the future. Naruto slowly put down the letter as some tears made their way down his cheek. They were not tears of pain but of joy. Joy knowing that his mother did not abandon him like many said she did, and that she did truly love him. He placed the letter down on the top of the drawers and opened one of them and saw the clothes. They were black and dark green with bits of silver on them. Pretty good. Might need to find some orange for it later, thought he before he turned his attention to the other contents of the drawers. In a plastic bag were rolls of green paper. He looks at it before figuring out it must have been the currency here. The dollar hut? Word name, he said aloud before putting it down and looking at the map. He spread the map out on top of the bed and was amazed at the intricate details. He then saw the giant book that said World History on the front in big bold letter. When he opened the first page, all the letter began to get all jumbled. This happened a lot. Even back in the academy when he read books or scrolls, the words would become jumbled. He would tell the instructors, but they would just say he was lying to get out of doing any work. Beep beep. Naruto was brought out of thought when he heard loud sirens and beeps coming from outside. Deciding it was time to see this new world with his own eyes, he opened a pair of sliding doors and walked out onto the terrace. What he saw made his eyes widen like saucers. There were buildings the size of Gamabunta made out of steel and all sorts of metals. Hell, some of them went all the way into the sky. Never in his life had he seen a building built as high as the ones he saw here. He looked down towards the streets of the cities and saw hundreds if not thousands of people just walking around casually. There were metal machines racing around on wheels that confused the hell out of Naruto. What was all Naruto could say as he stared at his surroundings. Never in a million years did he imagine things like this. Buildings as tall as the sky and machines that were racing around on roads and the people not caring or minding them at all. It left Naruto's mind completely boggled, but Naruto took a deep breath. Mom would not have brought me here if she didn't think it was the right choice. As much as I will miss the leave, this is my new home now and I actually have a parent out here. It will take time, but I can get used to this place. Just one step at a time, he thought. He looked at his surroundings again and smiled. He then puffed out his chest and took in a deep breath before he shouted out, "Look out world, because Naruto Uzumaki has arrived." Chapter 2. Naruto stared outside of the school bus window as the bus made its way down the streets of New York, passing the skyscrapers and the people by. His clothing had changed since he arrived in New York. He decided it was time to hang up the orange, but he wore an orange shirt from time to time since he didn't really feel the need to stick out anymore. He was currently wearing black jeans with black Converses, a white shirt with a picture of a wolf on the front, wearing sunglasses with the motto "I Howl For You" at the bottom. Over that he wore a dark green zip-up hooded jacket. 7 months had passed since Naruto had arrived in this new world, and it had taken him a long time to get used to the place. On the first day he was nearly hit by a car 4 times. He had given a waitress a $100 tip, much to his embarrassment and waitress's joy, and pulled out a kunai in the middle of Times Square by accident when a car siren went off, which startled him greatly. After a few weeks of adjusting and learning about this world culture, he headed off to the boarding school that his mom had enrolled him in and quickly moved into one of the dorms. He was surprised to find that he was sharing a dorm with 2 other boys, which meant he could not practice his jutsus or chakra control in the room. So he had to compromise and at night would make a shadow clone to stay in his bed while he went off for a few hours and train in a deserted forest area. His control over his chakra had significantly gotten better and could now tree walk and water walk like it was second nature. He focused on the leaf cutting exercise and the rock cutting exercise so he could improve on his wind manipulation. He did that very quickly after he discovered the pros to shadow clones. Since then he practiced his wind jutsus that his mom left for him. When he joined Yancy Academy, they quickly discovered that Naruto had a slight learning deficiency and found out he was dyslexic, meaning he had difficulty learning things from books and trouble reading since the words would just jumble around in his brain. Not only that, but he had ADHD, basically meaning he could not keep still. When he thought about it, it now made sense to why he struggled so much in the academy and why he could never stay in one place for too long. However, because of his learning difficulty, he was placed in the Year 2 year Bella, where he should be, since they felt it would be where he was most comfortable at and could help him the most. The day he moved into the dorm, he quickly befriended the 2 boys he was sharing with. They were 2 boys whose names were Percy Jackson and Grover Underwood. Percy was 12 and had black hair and sea green eyes. He was a little shorter than most, but then again Naruto had a bit of a growth spurt since he came to this world, since he now stood at a respectable 5'4". It's turned out Percy had dyslexia and ADHD too, which Naruto had admitted it was quite the coincidence. However, they both became quick friends since neither liked school all that much and preferred goofing off. Then there was Grover Underwood, who Naruto had to admit did not look like a 12-year-old. He looked the same age as him, but Grover just said he had trouble in school and was redoing 7th grade. Naruto didn't think much of it, so he just shrugged it off. Grover had Caucasian skin color with short curly brown hair and brown eyes. But unfortunately his legs were crippled when he was little, so he had to have crutches to help him walk. Yet that never stopped him when enchilada day came at the school cafeteria. He could not move any quicker. Not only that, but with Naruto heightened sense, he swore Grover smelled like a goat while Percy strangely smelled like the ocean. He shrugged it off, thinking they were just wearing strange deodorant. But the 3 became good friends, and since they shared a dorm room together, the 3 were pretty much inseparable. When they found out Naruto didn't have any parents, they sympathized for him, and Naruto was even invited over to Percy's for Christmas. Naruto was quick to make friends with Percy's mom, Sally Jackson, and she was delighted to see Percy finally make a friend. Though Percy's stepfather Gabe Ugliano was not too happy about it, saying they should not waste money on the punk. But Naruto paid for his stuff and didn't spend any of the Jacksons' money, much to Gabe's delight. Though when Percy asked Grover, he just said he already had plans and would see them after Christmas break. They didn't hear from him at all during the break until they returned to Yancy Academy. Naruto found it slightly odd at Grover's mysterious behavior, but he let it go. Everyone had their secrets. He knew that better than anyone. Right now they were on a school trip heading towards the Metropolitan Museum of Art that was being led by the Latin teacher Mr. Brunner. Mr. Brunner was a middle-aged man with scraggy thinning brown hair and beard and was confined to a wheelchair and always wore a tweed jacket. Despite his appearance, he was definitely one of Naruto and Percy's favorite teachers. He told interesting stories in class and was always up for a joke. On rare occasions he even brought Roman and Greek armor and weapons. Because of this, it was easily one of the only classes that Naruto and Percy did not fall asleep in. But Naruto could not help but have his guard up around the man. The man had just appeared one day, took over the Latin class and had quite an interest in both Percy and Naruto. At first it was only Percy, but after a couple of days and a lot of staring at Naruto, he began to take an interest in him too. "You stare any harder, the people might combust," Percy said as he jabbed Naruto in the ribs, causing the blonde to roll his eyes. We could only hope he smirked, getting a small chuckle from Percy. "Guys, don't joke about that," Grover said in a panicky voice, causing the 2 to stare at him incredulously. Lately Grover had been quite panicky a lot of the time lately. He was either worried about something or he kept drinking way too much coffee. "Right," both Naruto and Percy said together before shaking their heads and going back into silence. As the bus entered the parking lot and the class began to hop out, Naruto looked in front of the giant museum in wonder. Even after all these months of being in New York, the buildings in this world still amazed and confused him. "Come on everyone," Mr. Brunner said as he managed to get himself out of the bus. "Stay together and don't wander off. Don't want you to get into any trouble now, do we?" he said, glancing over towards Percy and Naruto. Why did he look at us when he said that?" Percy asked while Naruto just shrugged. "We do have a bit of a reputation in school," he said, to which Percy rolled his eyes before they followed Mr. Brunner. The class made their way into the museum as they walked past the giant pillars at the front of the museum, and Naruto couldn't help but notice how much Mr. Brunner and surprisingly Grover's face lit up when they saw all the Greek and Roman artifacts. The first stop on the little tour was to look at a bronze chariot that was enlaced with ivory. Mr. Brunner went on to explain how the chariot was used and that it was supposedly created by the Greek gods Athena and Poseidon. Apparently it was Athena who created the chariot, but it was Poseidon who supplied the horses. "Bet racing in one of those would be fun," Naruto whispered to Percy, getting a grin of approval from Percy. "Chariots racing around Central Park? Sounds fun and dangerous," Percy whispered back. "Exactly," Naruto replied, making Percy again roll his eyes at the blonde. Grover meanwhile looked at the grinning duo with worry. "Gods, these two are really going to be the death of me." "Keep up, Jackson," Uzumaki Mrs. Dodds said sweetly when the two noticed that the group had moved on while they were talking. She was this little math teacher from Georgia who always wore a black leather jacket, even though she was 50 years old. She joined just after Christmas break after their previous maths teacher had a nervous breakdown. She really did not like Percy for some odd reason, and she constantly called on him to answer questions she knew he did not know. For the next hour Mr. Brunner took the class all over the museum. He explained the different armors Greeks and Romans used, different strategies that were used at certain battles such as Battle of Troy. Meanwhile Naruto, Percy and Grover were standing at the back of the group somewhat paying attention when the class bitch, as Naruto and Percy called her Nancy Boboffet, began to throw small piece of bread at Grover which stuck to him since they had peanut butter and jelly on them. Nancy Boboffet was this horrid beast of a girl that had wild red frizzy hair and was a very butch and messy person. She was sweet one minute to the teachers and then a real bitch when the teacher had their back turned. She constantly teased on a lot of the school kids, especially Percy and Grover, because they were different from everyone else, but she would not go near Naruto since an incident in the past caused her to become very wary of him. Let's just say she chose the wrong day to pick on him and found herself pinned to the wall with pencil going through her clothes and pinning her to the wall while a sign was put on her saying "Escape monkey, please return to zoo." Despite this and Naruto's reputation in school, unfortunately Grover was still the subject of a lot of teasing and bullying due to him being crippled, and it made him an easy target, though it didn't happen as often once Naruto joined NC Academy and got involved. All those who tried to bully Grover either got scared off by Naruto and Percy or were subjected to Naruto's pranks that had began making a name for themselves during his time at school. There was one time when a group of kids tripped Grover over and dumped their food on him just because he was a cripple. Neither Naruto nor Percy took too kindly to that. However, the next day that group of boys found them hanging by their underwear on the school flagpole while the American national anthem began playing in the background, causing everyone in the area to roar with laughter. The boys didn't have a clue how it happened, but Percy and Grover both suspected Naruto had something to do with it if the menacing grin he gave off was any indication. As the group made their way through the hallways of the museum, both Naruto and Percy were looking at the mosaics and dishes that were against the wall or being held in special class cases so that they could be touched or ruined in any way. They recognized some of them from the stories that Mr. Brunner spoke about in class. There was one with Jason sailing across the ocean in the Argos with the Argonauts. Another was of the Battle of Troy, depicting the giant wooden horse the Greeks used to trick the Trojans, which ultimately led to the Trojans' demise. The main one that was there was the biggest of them all and depicted the 12 labors of Hercules. The first one was of Hercules, the demigod son of Zeus, fighting against the Nemean lion. It depicted his great and superior strength as he held the Nemean lion up in the air with his hand wrapped around its throat with a giant club in his other hand. They looked over to another one of the labors to see him capturing the golden hind of Artemis. When Naruto saw this, he couldn't help but frown slightly and have a twinge of anger towards it. It just seemed wrong to him for some reason, but he knew from the stories that the hind did escape in the end, yet Hercules still passed the third labor. They scanned through the other labors, which included defeating the Erymanthian boar, capture the Cretan bulls, obtain the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, and the rest. They then got to the final one, which showed Hercules fighting Cerberus and capturing it. But when he looked at it, Naruto only had one thing on his mind: Cerberus would make one badass summoning. The two moved on from their spot and they walked into a giant room at the center of the museum with Mr. Brunner wheeling himself over towards a shrine of sorts. He gathered all of the students around a 13-foot tall stone column with a big sphinx on the top, and started telling everyone how it was a grave marker, as steely, for a girl about their age. Naruto, Grover and Percy somehow found themselves at the front of the class instead of the back where they usually remain and had to look interested in what Mr. Brunner was saying. Mr. Brunner began to explain what the carvings on the sides meant and actually managed to catch both Naruto and Percy's attention because it was actually kind of interesting, but yet everyone else around them was talking and having their own conversations. Yet when Percy or Naruto told them to shut their traps, they got the evil eye from Mrs. Dodds. However, when Nancy Boboffet snickered about some of the statues being naked, Percy had enough and shouted at her to shut the hell up. Of course this caught everyone's attention as well as Mr. Brunner's. "Mr. Jackson, do you have something you wish to say?" Mr. Brunner asked, clasping his two hands together. "No sir," Percy mumbled out while the other began to snicker at him but quickly shut up when Naruto gave them his own evil eye. "Well then perhaps you can tell me what is happening in the picture," he said, motioning over to a picture on the stele that showed a man sitting on a throne with child in his hands and his mouth wide open. Percy said, starting off before getting a bit of confidence once he recognized the pictures. "That's Kronos eating his kids." "Yes," Mr. Brunner said, obviously not satisfied. "And he did this because?" "Well," Naruto heard Percy say as his friend racked his brains to figure it out. "Kronos was the king god and..." "God?" Mr. Brunner said, frowning before Percy quickly corrected himself. "Titan," he said, quickly correcting himself. He didn't trust his kids, who were the gods. So, Kronos ate them, right? But his wife had baby Zeus, and gave Kronos a rock to eat instead. Then when Zeus grew up, he tricked his dad, Kronos, into barfing up his brothers and sisters. You said all the girls behind them, causing Naruto, Percy, Grover and Mr. Brunner to roll their eyes. "Then there was big fight and the gods won," Percy continued and finished the answer, getting a nod of approval from Mr. Brunner. "That's correct," he said. "Then the world became ruled by the 12 Olympian gods, with the most powerful being the 3 brothers Zeus, Poseidon and Hades," he said, pointing towards 3 small figures. "Ever since they overthrew their father they have been rivals ever since. On many occasions the gods came down to earth and how should I put this," he said in thought before Naruto spoke up. "Hooked up because they couldn't keep it in their pants," he said, getting a round of laughter from everyone, even Mrs. Dodds and Mr. Brunner. "That is correct, Mr. Uzumaki. Can you tell me the correct term for these children?" he asked Naruto. Naruto thought for a second, knowing he read about this as he racked his brains to find the answer. "They were called demigods, right? Part mortal and part god," Naruto said, getting a nod from Mr. Brunner. "Can you perhaps name me some demigod heroes?" Mr. Brunner asked, directing the question towards Naruto again. Hercules and Perseus was ones, right? They were both sons of Zeus," he said, getting a nod of approval from Mr. Brunner. "Plus there was Theseus, who was a son of Poseidon." "That's correct. Very good, Mr. Uzumaki. Good to see you were paying attention in class." However, they heard snickers coming from the class behind them and Nancy Boboffet saying, "Like we're going to use this in real life. Like it's going to say on our job applications. Please explain why Kronos ate his kids or name a demigod." "And why, Mr. Uzumaki?" Brunner said. To paraphrase Mrs. Boboffet's excellent question, does this matter in real life? Naruto thought for a moment. It was an interesting question Mr. Brunner had thrown at them, but one he was completely unprepared for. So he just shrugged. "I'm sorry sir, but I really don't know." "Mr. Jackson, how about you?" he asked, but he got the same answer from Percy. "I see." Mr. Brunner looked disappointed. "Well, have credit to both Mr. Jackson and Mr. Uzumaki. On that note, it's time for lunch. Mrs. Dodds, would you lead us back outside?" said teacher nodded as the group ushered outside and began to walk back down the hallway. The group passed the other artifacts and Naruto looked around at any that he missed. Naruto quickly noticed Percy was not next to him but quickly saw him talking to Mr. Brunner. Naruto shrugged it off and continued to walk. As they got halfway down the hallway there was a small split in the side of one of the walls that led into another room. Curiosity getting the better of him, he walked in and looked at what was there. When he entered he stopped and marveled at the sight of a well-preserved Greek statue that was stood in the center of the room. The statue was of a woman who wore a dress that stopped just above the knees and was barefoot, and her hair was in a sort of bun. She carried a bow in one hand and an arrow in another. Then at her side was a wolf. When looking at her features, Naruto had to admit she was very beautiful but was not quite sure who it was. He looked around and spotted a small plaque in front of it but couldn't make out the word thanks to his dyslexia. Artemis, a voice called out, making Naruto turn around and sees Mr. Brunner wheeling himself into the room. Goddess of the hunt, moon, childbirth, wild animals and chastity. Hey, sorry for getting separated from the group. I wanted to see what was in here, and when I saw this statue I couldn't help but feel a little drawn to it. Mr. Brunner looked at Naruto as if he was trying to figure him out before he shook his head, and a small smile graced his face. That's okay, my boy. It is good to see a young man like yourself interested in history. Odd combination, isn't it, thought? To be the goddess of childbirth yet also the goddess of virginity. It kind of contradicts itself, don't you think? Many have thought that, but it's best not to argue with the titles of a goddess. Fair enough. She took an oath, right? To never have sex or be in a relationship with a man because of some guy called Orion who was killed and he was like her boyfriend or something? Something like that. Some say she mistook him for an animal when hunting one day. Others say she was tricked into shooting him by her brother Apollo. Meanwhile others say she never loved him to begin with. The only one who could answer that is Artemis herself. Naruto chuckled slightly. You talk as if she is real, he said before Mr. Brunner turned his wheelchair around. Come, let's go for lunch. We don't want to keep everyone waiting, he said. Naruto nodded and followed after. It was only until later that Naruto realized Mr. Brunner never answered his question. During lunch the class was gathered on the steps of the museum as they watched the traffic on both the roads and the walkways, as most were out from work and heading out for lunch. Up in the sky it looked like a nasty storm was brewing since dark clouds were heading over the city. Lately when Naruto watched TV it spoke on the news that all around the world floods, hurricanes and huge storms were forming, leaving many scientists confused about the strange weather patterns. Then you always had the guy with a giant sign around him saying end of the world is near. Naruto sat on the edge of a fountain with Percy and Grover as they ate away at their lunches while Naruto dug into his ramen. No one could ever understand how he managed to keep his ramen warm, and Naruto would always just say that it was a trade secret and left it that. Despite being in this great new world, Naruto greatly missed good old Ikaraku's ramen. He even had dreams about eating it again, but he made do with what he had. You get detention again? Grover asked, looking at Percy. Nah, he said. Not from Brunner. I just wish he'd lay off me sometimes. I mean, I'm not a genius. Got that right, Naruto said, chuckling, earning him a punch on the arm from Percy. Okay, Grover said, shrugging. Can I have your apple? He said, getting another chuckle from Naruto while Percy passed over the apple. Naruto looked over towards his class to see some of the guys were pelting pigeons with Lunchables crackers. I swear boys are so stupid, he muttered to himself before he stopped and thought about what he just said. Why the hell did I just say that? Nancy Bobovit was trying to pickpocket something from a lady's purse, and, of course, Mrs. Dodds wasn't seeing a thing. The three began to chat quietly about the trip and what they might be doing over the summer when Nancy Bobovit walked up to them with some of her goons behind and decided to dump her lunch onto Grover. Oops, she said, grinning with bits of Cheetos stuck in her crooked teeth. Percy was angry and jumped up and looked like he was about to eat her before Naruto quickly grabbed and set him back down. Don't. You will just get yourself into more trouble like you always do. Don't sink down to her level. She will get what's coming to her eventually. That much I can promise. Percy, who did not look very convinced, sat back down, but his eyes didn't look away from Nancy Bobovit. That's when something very unexplained happened. As Naruto was sitting down eating his ramen and thinking of new ways to prank and torture the Bobovit beast, Nancy suddenly fell into the water fountain, making a loud and audible splash which caught the attention of everyone, including the teachers, with Mrs. Dodds making her way over. Mrs. Dodds, Percy just pushed me, she cried out, but neither Naruto nor Percy was listening. Both were trying to figure out what just happened. Naruto was not looking at Nancy when it happened, but he swore at the corner of his eye he saw what looked to be some sort of tentacle made of water grab Nancy and push her into the fountain. Mr. Jackson comes with me now, honey, Mrs. Dodds said as she looked directly at Percy, making Naruto shake out of his thoughts. No, wait, I pushed her, Grover said, trying to stand up, but without his crutches it made it a little difficult. Percy was a little stunned that Grover was trying to cover for him, while Naruto was a bit put off that Grover wanted to take the punishment. However, Mrs. Dodds was not buying it, and she then led Percy way back inside the museum, where Percy was most likely going to get another scolding and another detention. Why did you say you pushed her? I might not have been looking in her direction, but I know you were sitting down. Grover said, trying to think of something which amused Naruto at the constipated look Grover got when he tried to think of a suitable lie or excuse. Grover really was an awful liar. Oh fine, don't tell me, Naruto said in a huff before standing up. I'm going to the bathroom, he said, heading back into the museum. No wait, Grover said, but Naruto was already inside the building. Damn it, Grover said as he looked over to Mr. Brunner, trying to get his attention. With Naruto, oh man, where the hell are the bathrooms? I'm bursting here, he thought aloud as he tried to follow the sign on the walls to the bathroom that just led him around in circles since he couldn't read the signs properly. This is getting ridiculous. Damn dyslexia, he said before he heard a scream come from one of the room to his left. That sounded like Percy. I recognize that girly scream anywhere, Naruto said before he began to sprint towards the room where the scream originated from. Percy, where are you? He called out and noticed that no one else was around. That's odd, he thought before he ran into the fall where he heard Percy scream. Naruto, run, Percy suddenly said, appearing in front of him from round the corner and running towards him. Percy, what the hell are you? Where is it? A deep scratchy voice called, not sounding very human, before a figure appeared behind Percy. Whatever it was had eyes as black as coal with a grayish body with sharp teeth and leathery like wings on its back. What the hell is that? Naruto thought to himself, never seeing anything like it, and he had seen a lot of weird things before he noticed it was about to take a swipe at Percy. Pushing Chakra to his feet, he ran towards the creature and delivered a hard kick to its face, knocking it back and hitting the wall behind it. I won't ask again. Where is the lightning bolt? The creature asked, with Naruto taking a look towards Percy. What the hell is she talking about? Naruto asked, getting in his fighting stance. This was a bad date not to bring my weapons pouch. I don't know. Mrs. Dodds took me away to talk and then she turned into that. Then she started ranting about me stealing a lightning bolt. Stealing a lightning bolt? But that doesn't make sense. And did you just say that thing is Mrs. Dodds? Naruto asked, looking slightly wide-eyed, getting a nod of confirmation. Come here, honeys, she yelled as she spread out her wings and began to flap charge over towards them. While Percy had a look of fear across his face, Naruto was keeping it together and trying to think what to do. I don't have my weapons with me, so that's out. I kicked her, but yet it doesn't look as if it did all that much. I'm going to have to use a jutsu. Percy, Naruto called, getting his attention. What I'm about to do, I need you to swear that you will keep it a secret and that you will not tell anyone about it. Understand? Naruto, what do you understand? Naruto repeated with a bit more force. Percy, realizing this was not the time to argue, just nodded his head. Right, Naruto said as he looked directly at Mrs. Dodds. Take this, he said as his hands began to make hand signs. Wind style, wind palm, he shouted as a blast of wind shot out from his palm and hit Mrs. Dodds square in the chest and forced her back and into the wall she hit before, which caused a hiss of pain to escape from the Mrs. Dodds' lips. Percy, meanwhile, was gaping like a fish out of water as he saw what Naruto just did. HL? Explain later, Naruto said as he saw Mrs. Dodds getting up again. Man, what does it take to keep this old bat down? Mrs. Dodds got up again and charged towards both of them again, anger clearly shown on her wrinkled, monstrous face. You will pay for that. Percy and now Naruto were a little worried since Naruto's attack didn't seem to be doing much. Naruto was not seriously contemplating using the Rasengan. However, they were both brought out of their thoughts when they heard the screeching of wheels get closer to them, and when they both looked over they were surprised to see Mr. Brunner there in his wheelchair. Percy, Naruto, what ho? He shouted as he threw an item to both of them. Both boys caught the items. Percy and Naruto looked down to see what they caught and saw that they both now had a pen in their hands. Both boys looked at each other, then back towards their items before shouting out, what the hell are these supposed to do? Percy, not knowing what to do with the pen, just decided to twist the cap to see if there was some sort of hidden weapon in the pen, but immediately retracted his hand when the pen suddenly became a sword the length of his arm. Whoa, both boys thought before Naruto tried to do the same with his, but saw it wasn't a twist pen but more of an ink pen. So he yanked the cap off. As soon as he did, the cap and the pen both turned into a pairs of long hunting knives. Well, Naruto said, let's see what these bad boys can do, he said before he charged towards Mrs. Dodds with Percy very shakily going with him. Die, honeys, she said before she met Naruto, who used his shinobi speed and flexibility to dodge a swipe from her talons and give her a quick kick to the ribs before with both of his knives stabbed Mrs. Dodds in each shoulder, earning a big hiss of pain to erupt from her mouth. Finish her, Percy, Naruto shouted as Percy ran towards her and while having one of his eyes closed slashed down at Mrs. Dodd's leathery torso before she erupted into nothing but gold dust. Both boys looked to where Mrs. Dodd's previously was and didn't understand what just happened. Did they just kill her or did she just disappear? Both boys looked at each other before letting out a loud sigh. They looked over to where Mr. Brunner was but saw that he was gone. They put their weapons back into their pen forms before they left the hallway, not wanting to explain the bit of mess they made in there. When they got back out they were interrupted by Nancy Bobalfett. "Where have you idiots been? Mrs. Kerr is about to take us back in the museum," she said sneering. Who the hell is Mrs. Kerr?" Percy asked, but all he got was Nancy rolling her eyes and walking away muttering idiots. Both boys even noticed her previously wet clothes had now somehow dried themselves. Confused, they then walked over to Grover and he gave them the same answer, but he was stuttering slightly so they knew he was lying. So instead they turned their attention to Mr. Brunner. He looked up, a little distracted. "Ah, that would be my 2 pens. Please bring your own writing utensil in the future, Mr. Jackson." "Mr. Uzumaki," he said. "You are okay," both boys muttered, looking at each other before handing them over and Mr. Brunner putting them into his front pocket. "Sir," Percy said, "where's Mrs. Dodds?" He stared at the 2 boys blankly. "Who?" "The other chaperone. Mrs. Dodds, the pre-algebra teacher," Naruto said, looking Mr. Brunner square in the eyes. Naruto saw a tiny show of deception, but it quickly went away as if it was never there before. Mr. Brunner let a frown appear on his face and sat forward, looking slightly concerned. "Percy, Naruto, there is no Mrs. Dodds on this trip. As far as I know, there has never been a Mrs. Dodds at Yancy Academy. Are you both feeling all right?" "Say what?" both boys said together, not quite believing what they just heard. "You boys may have just got Mrs. Kerr's name mixed up with someone else, perhaps an old teacher from a previous school." "Don't worry about it, boys," Mr. Brunner said before wheeling off. "Come, it's time to get back into the museum." As he wheeled away, both Percy and Naruto stood there with dumbstruck looks on their face, with only one thing coming to mind with everything that just happened. What the hell? I hope you all liked the video. And if you all want the next part of this video, please like the video and comment 3 hearts. Please subscribe to my channel so whenever I upload a video you will notify.